The pregnancy test sat on our bathroom counter like a tiny plastic oracle, 2 pink lines announcing what would either be the best news of my life or the beginning of my personal nightmare. At that moment, staring at those lines while Olivia bounced on her toes beside me, I chose to believe it was the former. "Nick, can you believe it?" she whispered, her voice trembling with what I thought was joy. "Another baby. Max is going to be such a good big brother." I wrapped my arms around her, breathing in the familiar scent of her vanilla shampoo, feeling her heart race against my chest. "This is incredible, Liv. I mean, we talked about it, but now that it's real?" "I know, right?" I was starting to think maybe it wasn't meant to happen again. She pulled back to look at me, her green eyes bright with tears. "You're happy, aren't you? I mean, really happy?" The question struck me as odd. Why wouldn't I be happy? We'd been trying for months. Max, our 8-year-old, had been asking for a sibling since he learned to talk. Our finances were stable enough, my auto repair shop was doing well, and Olivia's law firm kept her busy with corporate cases that paid the bills and then some. "Of course I'm happy," I said, kissing her forehead. "This is everything we wanted." But even as I said it, something nagged at me. Maybe it was the way she'd been acting lately. Distant, always checking her phone, working late more often than usual. Or maybe it was how she seemed surprised by my enthusiasm, as if she'd expected a different reaction. "We should tell Max tonight," I suggested, "and maybe call your parents, let them know they're getting another grandchild." "Actually," Olivia said, stepping away from me and adjusting her robe, "I was thinking we should wait a bit. Make sure everything's okay first. It's still early." I nodded, though something about her hesitation bothered me. With Max, she'd wanted to shout it from the rooftops the moment we found out. She'd called everyone we knew, started looking at cribs online that same day. "Whatever you think is best," I said. "But I'm excited, Liv. Really excited." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "Me too. I just want to be careful this time." That evening, I found myself watching her more closely than usual. She picked at her dinner, claimed she wasn't feeling well, and spent most of the night on her laptop in the living room while I helped Max with his homework. When I asked what she was working on, she said it was just a case review, nothing important. "Dad, is Mom okay?" Max asked as I tucked him into bed. "She seems weird lately." Out of the mouths of babes. If an 8-year-old could sense something was off, maybe I wasn't imagining things. "She's just tired from work, buddy. You know how busy she gets." "Yeah, but she's been weird for a while now, like she doesn't laugh at my jokes anymore." I sat on the edge of his bed, studying his serious little face. Max had always been perceptive, maybe too much so for his own good. He noticed things other kids his age missed, remembered conversations adults thought he hadn't heard. "Sometimes grown-ups have a lot on their minds," I said, "but Mom loves you very much. We both do." "I know that," he said, rolling his eyes in that way that reminded me he was getting older, more aware of the world around him. "I just wish she'd tell us what's wrong instead of pretending everything's fine." After he fell asleep, I found Olivia still on her laptop, typing furiously. The screen angled away from me, but I caught a glimpse of what looked like a text message conversation before she quickly minimized the window. "Who are you texting so late?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "Just Maya from work. She's having some issues with her husband and needed to vent." Maya. I'd met her a few times at office parties. A sharp-tongued woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes that cost more than most people made in a month. She'd always struck me as the type who thrived on drama, the kind of person who collected secrets like some people collected stamps. "Everything okay with them?" "Oh, you know how it is. Marriage stuff." Olivia closed the laptop and stretched. "I'm exhausted. Think I'll head to bed." She kissed my cheek, a quick, perfunctory peck, and disappeared upstairs. I sat alone in the living room, staring at the blank television screen and trying to shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted in my world. The next few weeks fell into a strange rhythm. Olivia continued to work late, often not coming home until after Max was asleep. She claimed morning sickness was making her nauseated, though I never actually saw her throw up. When I suggested she see a doctor, she said she'd already made an appointment but didn't need me to come along. "It's just routine stuff, Nick. First trimester checkups are pretty boring." I wanted to argue, to remind her that I'd been there for every appointment with Max, that we'd done this together before, but something in her tone warned me off, and I found myself nodding instead of pushing. It was around this time that I started noticing the pattern with my brother Dean. Dean was 2 years younger than me, but had always acted like the older sibling. He was the one who'd gone to college on a baseball scholarship, who'd landed a job at a downtown investment firm, who drove a BMW and lived in a condo with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. He was also the one who could charm anyone within 5 minutes of meeting them, including my wife. I'd never thought much of their friendship before. Dean had been at our wedding, had been one of the first people to hold Max when he was born. He was family, and family was important to both Olivia and me. But lately, I'd started noticing things. At my mother's birthday dinner 2 weeks after the pregnancy test, Dean and Olivia had both disappeared for nearly an hour. When I asked where they'd gone, Olivia said they'd stepped outside to take a work call. Apparently, Dean's firm was looking into some legal issues that fell under Olivia's expertise. "Since when do you handle investment law?" I'd asked later in the car. "It's not investment law exactly, more like regulatory compliance stuff. Really boring." But she'd been animated when they returned, laughing at something Dean had said, her cheeks flushed from what she claimed was the cold air. Dean had been in a good mood too, more talkative than usual, asking about the shop and whether I'd heard any good jokes lately. The same thing happened at our neighbor's barbecue the following weekend. 1 minute they were both there, Olivia helping set up the dessert table while Dean talked sports with the other guys, and the next minute they were nowhere to be found. This time they were gone for 45 minutes, and when they returned, Olivia's hair was mussed and Dean had grass stains on his shirt. "We took a walk around the block," Olivia explained when I asked. "I needed some air." "In the Hendersons' backyard? We cut through their yard to get to the sidewalk. You know how overgrown their hedge is." It was a reasonable explanation, but something about the way she avoided my eyes when she said it made my stomach twist. And Dean seemed almost smug, like he was enjoying some private joke. I started paying more attention after that, and the pattern became impossible to ignore. Every family gathering, every social event, every time we were all in the same place, Dean and Olivia would find an excuse to slip away together. Sometimes it was a phone call, sometimes it was getting something from the car, sometimes it was just stepping outside for fresh air. But it always happened, and it always lasted longer than it should have. The worst part was how obvious they thought they were being. The lingering looks across the dinner table, the inside jokes I wasn't part of, the way Dean's hand would brush against Olivia's when he passed her a drink. It was like watching a bad soap opera, except the actors were my wife and my brother, and I was apparently the only one who didn't know the script. My mother noticed too, though she was more diplomatic about it than I would have been. "That boy always did like attention," she said one afternoon when I stopped by to help her with some yard work. "Even when you were little, he couldn't stand it if someone else was the center of focus." "What do you mean?" She gave me a look that suggested I was being deliberately dense. "I mean, your brother has always been jealous of what you have, Nicholas. Your marriage, your son, your business. Dean's got money and a fancy job, but he doesn't have a family." "So you think he's just being friendly?" "I think Dean has never learned the difference between wanting something and taking it." Her words stayed with me as I drove home that evening. Dean had always been competitive. It was part of his charm, the way he threw himself into everything with complete confidence that he'd come out on top. But competing for a promotion or a spot on a team was different from competing for your brother's wife, wasn't it? That night, I watched Olivia more carefully than I had in weeks. She was quieter than usual during dinner, picking at her food and checking her phone every few minutes. When Max asked her about the baby, she seemed startled, as if she'd forgotten she was supposed to be pregnant. "Oh, everything's fine, sweetheart. The baby's growing right on schedule." "When will we know if it's a boy or a girl?" "Not for a while yet. These things take time." After Max went to bed, I found her in our bedroom, staring at herself in the full-length mirror. She was wearing one of my old t-shirts and a pair of pajama pants, her hand resting on her still flat stomach. "You okay?" I asked. She jumped, as if she hadn't heard me come in. "Fine, just tired." "You've been tired a lot lately." "I'm pregnant, Nick. Tired comes with the territory." I wanted to point out that she hadn't been this tired with Max, that she'd actually seemed to have more energy during her first pregnancy. But the conversation felt like walking through a minefield, every word potentially explosive. Instead, I wrapped my arms around her from behind, resting my chin on her shoulder so we were both looking at our reflection. For a moment, we looked like the couple we'd always been, high school sweethearts who'd made it work, who'd built a life together through sheer stubborn determination and genuine affection. "I love you," I said, and meant it despite everything. "I love you too," she replied, but her voice sounded hollow, like she was reading lines from a script she'd memorized but didn't understand. That night, I lay awake long after Olivia had fallen asleep, staring at the ceiling and trying to make sense of the pieces that didn't fit. The pregnancy that had surprised her more than it should have, the secretive phone calls and late nights at work, the disappearing acts with my brother, the way she seemed to be going through the motions of our life together without actually being present for any of it. Maybe I was paranoid, maybe pregnancy hormones were making her act differently, and my own insecurities were making me see patterns that didn't exist. Maybe Dean was just being Dean, charming and attention-seeking and completely oblivious to how his behavior might be interpreted. Or maybe my wife was having an affair with my brother, and the baby she was carrying wasn't mine. The thought hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath and making my chest tight. I rolled over to look at Olivia, sleeping peacefully beside me, one hand curled under her cheek like a child. She looked innocent in sleep, younger than her 34 years, nothing like a woman capable of betraying her husband with his own brother. But appearances, as I was learning, could be deceiving. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs to my laptop, telling myself I was just going to check email, maybe look at some parts catalogs for the shop. Instead, I found myself researching DNA testing, reading about paternity tests and how they worked, how accurate they were, how much they cost. The websites were full of testimonials from men who'd discovered their children weren't biologically theirs, stories of betrayal and heartbreak that made my situation seem almost mundane by comparison. But they also offered something I hadn't expected. Hope. Not hope that I was wrong, though I desperately wanted to be, but hope that I could know for sure, one way or another. Knowledge, I'd always believed, was better than uncertainty, even when the knowledge might destroy everything I thought I knew about my life. I bookmarked several sites and closed the laptop, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd crossed some invisible line. By even considering the possibility that Olivia was cheating, that the baby wasn't mine, I'd acknowledged that our marriage might be built on lies, and once you start looking for lies, it becomes impossible to stop seeing them everywhere. The DNA testing kit arrived on a Tuesday, hidden inside a plain brown envelope that could have contained anything from tax documents to catalog orders. I'd had it delivered to the shop rather than home, not wanting to explain to Olivia why we were getting mail from a genetic testing company. "Well, what's that?" Gus asked, looking up from the engine he was rebuilding. Gus Martinez had been my business partner for 6 years and my friend for longer than that. He was the kind of guy who could diagnose a transmission problem by the sound it made and fix a marriage with a 6-pack of beer and some honest conversation. If anyone would understand what I was going through, it would be Gus. "Nothing important," I said, shoving the envelope into my toolbox. "Just some paperwork." But Gus had known me too long to buy that explanation. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked over, his expression serious. "Nick, you've been acting weird for weeks. Weirder than usual, I mean. What's going on?" I looked around the shop, making sure we were alone. Our 2 other mechanics were at lunch, and the customer waiting area was empty. Still, I lowered my voice when I spoke. "I think Olivia might be cheating on me." Gus's eyebrows shot up. "With who?" "My brother." "Dean, are you serious?" "I wish I wasn't." I pulled the envelope back out of my toolbox and showed him the return address. "This is a paternity test kit. She's pregnant, and I need to know if the baby is mine." Gus stared at the envelope for a long moment, then looked back at me. "Man, that's heavy. What makes you think she's messing around?" I told him about the pattern I'd noticed, the disappearing acts at family gatherings, the way Dean and Olivia seemed to have their own private conversations that excluded everyone else. I told him about Olivia's strange behavior since announcing the pregnancy, her secretiveness about doctor's appointments, her late nights at work. "It could all be innocent," I said, "but my gut tells me it's not." "Your gut's usually pretty reliable," Gus said. "Remember when you said that blue Camaro was going to be nothing but trouble? Owner brought it back 4 times before he finally traded it in. This is a little more serious than a problematic muscle car." Yeah, but the principle's the same. You know when something's not right." He handed the envelope back to me. "So what's your plan?" "I need samples from Olivia and the baby when it's born. Maybe from Dean, too, if I can manage it. The kit comes with instructions for collecting DNA without the person knowing." "That sounds kind of sketchy." "So is sleeping with your brother-in-law." Gus couldn't argue with that logic. "You want me to help?" The offer surprised me. Gus was married to a woman named Carmen who thought the sun rose and set on his shoulders, and they had 3 kids who adored their father. He'd never been in a situation like mine, never had reason to doubt his family's loyalty. "I appreciate it, but this is something I need to handle myself. Just remember, whatever you find out, you've got people who care about you, and Max is your son no matter what some test says. You raised him, you love him, he loves you. That's what matters." I nodded, though I wasn't sure I agreed. Biology might not be everything, but it wasn't nothing either. If Olivia had been lying to me about Max's paternity for 8 years, it would change everything I thought I knew about my life. That evening I studied the testing kit instructions while Olivia worked late again. According to the paperwork, I needed samples from inside the cheek, easy enough to collect from a toothbrush or drinking glass. The baby would be more complicated since it wasn't born yet, but the kit included information about testing umbilical cord tissue after delivery. Max wandered into the kitchen while I was reading, looking for a snack before bed. "What's that, Dad?" "Just some boring paperwork, buddy. Nothing interesting." He peered over my shoulder anyway. "DNA testing? Are we going to find out if we're related to famous people?" Tommy Henderson's mom did one of those tests and found out they're descended from some king in England. "Something like that," I said, quickly folding the papers and putting them away. "How was school today?" "Okay, I guess. We're doing family trees and social studies. I need to ask Mom about her side of the family." "What do you want to know?" "Just basic stuff, like where her parents were born, what jobs her grandparents had. She said she'd help me this weekend, but she's been saying that for 2 weeks." I felt a familiar stab of guilt. Olivia's distance wasn't just affecting me, it was affecting Max, too. Whatever was going on between her and Dean, our son was caught in the middle of it. "I'll talk to her," I promised. "Maybe we can work on it together." "Thanks, Dad. You're the best." His simple faith in me made my chest tight. Max trusted me to fix things, to make everything okay, but I wasn't sure I could deliver on that promise. If my suspicions were right, our family was about to implode in ways that would hurt him most of all. The opportunity to collect Olivia's DNA came sooner than I'd expected. She came down with what she claimed was morning sickness the next day, spending most of the evening in the bathroom and drinking ginger ale from a glass I was careful not to wash. While she slept, I used the cotton swabs from the testing kit to collect saliva from the rim of the glass, sealing the samples in the provided containers and labeling them according to the instructions. It felt like a violation, sneaking around my own house to gather evidence against my wife, but I'd gone too far to back out now. Getting a sample from Dean proved trickier. He wasn't exactly in the habit of dropping by our house for casual visits, and I couldn't think of a natural way to invite him over without raising suspicions. The solution came from an unexpected source: my sister Brianna's engagement party. Brianna was getting married in the spring, and she'd decided to throw a casual get-together to celebrate her engagement. The party was at our parents' house, the same place where we'd celebrated birthdays and holidays for as long as I could remember. Dean would definitely be there, and in the chaos of a family gathering, it would be easy to collect a DNA sample without anyone noticing. "Are you feeling up to going?" I asked Olivia the morning of the party. She'd been claiming nausea for several days, though she seemed fine when she thought I wasn't watching. "I think so. The morning sickness has been better lately." "Good. Brianna would be disappointed if we missed it." "Will Dean be there?" The question seemed casual enough, but something in her tone made me look at her more closely. She was standing at the bathroom mirror, applying lipstick with more care than usual for a family gathering. "Probably. Why?" "No reason. I just haven't seen him in a while." That was a lie. She'd seen him just last weekend at our cousin's baby shower, where they'd once again disappeared together for the better part of an hour. But I didn't call her on it. Instead, I smiled and said I was looking forward to seeing everyone too. The party was exactly what I'd expected. Too much food, too much wine, and too much family drama packed into my parents' small living room. Brianna glowed with happiness, showing off her engagement ring to anyone who would listen, while her fiancé stood nearby looking slightly overwhelmed by the chaos. Dean arrived fashionably late, as usual, carrying a bottle of expensive champagne and wearing a smile that could have powered the house. He made his rounds, hugging relatives and charming everyone with stories from his latest business trip, but I noticed his eyes kept drifting to Olivia. She noticed too. Every time he looked her way, she'd blush and look down, like a teenager with a crush. It was nauseating to watch, made worse by the fact that everyone else seemed oblivious to what was happening right in front of them. "Olivia looks wonderful," my mother said, appearing at my elbow with a plate of appetizers. "Pregnancy suits her." "Yeah, she's glowing," I agreed, though the glow seemed to have more to do with my brother's presence than any pregnancy hormones. "Have you thought about names yet?" "It's still early. We're waiting to find out the gender before we get too attached to anything specific." "That's wise. Though I have to say, if it's a boy, you should consider family names. Dean Nicholas has a nice ring to it, don't you think?" I nearly choked on my drink. "Dean Nicholas?" "Well, Dean after your brother, Nicholas after you. It would be a lovely tribute to both of you." The irony was almost too much to bear. If my suspicions were right, naming the baby after Dean would be more accurate than my mother could possibly know. "We'll definitely consider it," I said, excusing myself before she could suggest any more names. I found Dean in the kitchen, opening his champagne and chatting with my cousin Mike about baseball statistics. It was the perfect opportunity. He'd set his beer bottle on the counter while he worked the cork, and the kitchen was crowded enough that no one would notice me palming it. "Nick!" Dean called out when he saw me. "Just the man I wanted to see. Mike here thinks the Cardinals have a shot at the playoffs this year. Tell him he's dreaming." "I don't know," I said, casually moving closer to the counter. "Stranger things have happened." While they argued about batting averages and pitching rotations, I slipped Dean's beer bottle into the pocket of my jacket. My heart was racing, but no one seemed to notice anything unusual. The rest of the party passed in a blur of forced conversation and fake smiles. I watched Dean and Olivia carefully, noting how they seemed to orbit each other without ever getting too close, at least not when other people were watching. But I caught the meaningful looks, the brief touches when they thought no one was paying attention. The final confirmation came when I went upstairs to use the bathroom. The main floor powder room was occupied, so I climbed the stairs to the bathroom I'd used as a kid, the one with the faded wallpaper and the mirror that had witnessed decades of family secrets. As I reached the top of the stairs, I heard voices coming from my old bedroom. Olivia's voice, low and urgent, and Dean's deeper tone responding. The door was cracked open just enough for me to see inside without being seen. They were standing close together, closer than a brother-in-law and sister-in-law should stand. Dean's hand was on Olivia's arm, his thumb stroking her skin in a gesture that was unmistakably intimate. "We can't keep doing this," Olivia was saying. "It's getting too risky." "I know, but I can't stop thinking about you, about us." "There is no us, Dean. There's Nick, and there's Max, and there's this baby. Is it mine?" The question hung in the air between them like a physical presence. I held my breath, waiting for her answer, knowing that whatever she said would change everything. "I don't know," she whispered. "The timing. It could be either of you." Dean pulled her closer, and for a horrible moment I thought he was going to kiss her. Instead, he rested his forehead against hers, their bodies pressed together in a way that left no doubt about the nature of their relationship. "We'll figure it out," he said. "Whatever happens, we'll figure it out." I backed away from the door, my legs shaky and my stomach churning. I'd been hoping to be wrong, praying that my suspicions were just paranoid fantasies brought on by stress and insecurity. But there was no denying what I'd just witnessed. My wife was having an affair with my brother, and the baby she was carrying might not be mine. I made it to the bathroom just in time to throw up, retching until there was nothing left in my stomach but bile and betrayal. When I finally emerged, the party was still going strong downstairs, everyone laughing and celebrating while my world crumbled around me. "There you are," Olivia said when I rejoined the group. I was starting to worry. "Just needed some air," I said, the lie coming easily now that I knew how the game was played. We left shortly after that, Max falling asleep in the back seat while Olivia chattered about what a lovely party it had been. I nodded and made appropriate responses, but inside I was already planning my next move. The DNA samples went out in the mail the next morning, along with a check for expedited processing. According to the testing company, I'd have results within a week. 7 days to find out if my marriage was built on lies, if my brother had betrayed me in the worst possible way, if the child my wife was carrying belonged to someone else. 7 days to decide what I was going to do about it. The DNA results arrived on a Thursday morning, delivered in the same plain envelope that had started this nightmare. I stared at the return address for a long moment before opening it, knowing that whatever was inside would either restore my faith in my family or destroy it completely. The report was clinical and straightforward, full of scientific terminology that boiled down to a simple, devastating conclusion. The baby Olivia was carrying was not mine. The genetic markers matched Dean's sample with 99.7% certainty. I sat in my office at the shop, reading the results over and over, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into a different truth. But the science was clear, undeniable. My wife was pregnant with my brother's child. "Nick, you okay, man?" Gus appeared in the doorway, his face creased with concern. "You look like you've seen a ghost." I handed him the report without a word. He read it quickly, his expression growing darker with each line. "Holy crap," he said finally. "I'm sorry, Nick. I really hoped you were wrong." "So did I." My voice sounded hollow, like it was coming from someone else. "What am I supposed to do with this?" "That's up to you. But if it were me, I'd want everyone to know what kind of people they really are." The idea had been forming in the back of my mind since I'd sent off the DNA samples, a plan so audacious and potentially destructive that I'd barely allowed myself to think about it. But now, with proof of their betrayal in my hands, it seemed like the only appropriate response. "Brianna's wedding is next weekend?" I said slowly. "Yeah, so?" "So the whole family will be there. Everyone who matters, everyone who knows Dean and Olivia and thinks they're such wonderful people." Gus caught on immediately. "You want to expose them at the wedding?" I want them to face the consequences of their choices. They've been sneaking around behind my back, lying to everyone, making a fool out of me. Maybe it's time for some honesty. That's going to cause a scene. Good. They deserve a scene. Gus was quiet for a moment, studying my face. You sure about this? Once you do it, there's no taking it back. There's already no taking it back. The damage is done. This just makes sure everyone knows who did it. The week leading up to the wedding passed in a strange haze of normalcy. Olivia continued her routine of late nights and morning sickness, while I played the part of the supportive husband, helping her pick out a dress that would hide her growing belly and making sure she had everything she needed for the ceremony. Max was excited about the wedding, especially since he'd been chosen as the ring bearer. He spent hours practicing his walk down the aisle, carrying a small pillow with mock rings attached, taking his role very seriously. Do you think Aunt Brianna will be happy? He asked one evening while we practiced in the living room. I'm sure she will be. Weddings are happy occasions. Even when families fight? The question caught me off guard. What do you mean? I heard you and Mom talking the other night. It sounded like you were upset about something. I'd thought we'd been quiet, but Max had always been a light sleeper with excellent hearing. How much had he overheard? Sometimes grown-ups disagree about things, I said carefully. It doesn't mean we don't love each other. Is it about the baby? Why would you think that? Because Mom acts weird whenever anyone mentions it, like she's scared or something. Out of the mouths of babes. If an 8-year-old could sense that something was wrong, how had I missed it for so long? The baby is fine, I said, which was technically true. The baby was healthy, as far as I knew. It just wasn't mine. The wedding was held at a country club outside town, the kind of place with manicured lawns and crystal chandeliers that charged extra for everything from parking to coat check. Brianna had always dreamed of a fairy tale wedding, and she'd gotten her wish. White roses everywhere, a string quartet playing classical music, and enough tulle to outfit a small ballet company. I wore my best suit and practiced my speech in the mirror, the words I'd been rehearsing for days. Olivia looked beautiful in a flowing blue dress that concealed her pregnancy, her hair styled in an elegant updo that made her look younger and more innocent than she had any right to. You look handsome, she said, adjusting my tie in our hotel room before the ceremony. I'm proud to be your wife. The words should have meant something. A week ago, they would have made me smile, would have reminded me why I'd fallen in love with her in the first place. Now they just felt like another lie in a relationship that had apparently been built on deception. You look beautiful too, I said, because it was expected, because I was still playing the role of devoted husband for a few more hours. The ceremony itself was perfect, Brianna radiant in her white gown, her groom teary-eyed with happiness, Max walking down the aisle with careful steps and a serious expression. I watched from the second row, surrounded by family members who had no idea that their world was about to change. Dean sat across the aisle with our cousins, looking handsome in his tuxedo and charming everyone around him with whispered jokes during the quieter moments. Olivia sat beside me, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue and murmuring about how beautiful everything was. They were both such good actors. I wondered how long they'd been practicing. The reception was held in the club's main ballroom, decorated with more white roses and enough candles to illuminate a small city. The wedding party was introduced to enthusiastic applause, followed by the traditional first dance and father-daughter dance that left half the guests in tears. I bided my time through dinner, making small talk with relatives I hadn't seen in months, complimenting the food and the decorations and playing the part of the happy family man. Olivia sat beside me, occasionally resting her hand on my arm in a gesture that probably looked affectionate to anyone watching. Dean was at the head table with the rest of the wedding party, regaling his table mates with stories that had them laughing throughout the meal. Every so often, he'd catch Olivia's eye across the room, and they'd share one of their meaningful looks that no one else seemed to notice. But I noticed. I noticed everything now. The moment came during the toasts, after the best man had finished his rambling speech about college adventures and the maid of honor had made everyone cry with her tribute to friendship. The DJ handed the microphone to anyone who wanted to say a few words about the happy couple, and several relatives took turns sharing memories and offering advice. I waited until the official toasts were finished, until people were starting to relax and focus on their dessert and champagne. Then I stood up, my heart pounding but my voice steady. "Excuse me," I said, raising my glass. "I'd like to say something." The room quieted, faces turning toward me with polite attention. Brianna smiled encouragingly from the head table, probably expecting some heartfelt words about family and love and new beginnings. "I want to talk about family," I began, my voice carrying clearly across the room. about the bonds that tie us together and what happens when those bonds are broken. Olivia's hand tightened on my arm. Nick, what are you doing? I ignored her, focusing on the faces around me, relatives and friends who'd known me since childhood, who'd celebrated my marriage and the birth of my son, who thought they knew everything there was to know about the Rollins family. My wife recently told me she was pregnant with our second child, I continued. I was overjoyed. We'd been trying for months, and the news seemed like a blessing. Murmurs of congratulations rippled through the room. Several people raised their glasses, thinking this was going to be a happy announcement. But then I started noticing things, I said, my voice growing stronger. The way my wife and my brother always seemed to disappear together at family gatherings. The secretive phone calls, the late nights at work, the way they looked at each other when they thought no one was watching. The room was completely quiet now. I could see confusion on some faces, dawning understanding on others. Olivia had gone pale beside me, her grip on my arm almost painful. So, I decided to do something about my suspicions. I ordered a DNA test kit and collected samples from everyone involved. Nick, please, Olivia whispered, but her voice was lost in the sudden buzz of conversation that erupted around us. Dean had gone rigid at the head table, his champagne glass frozen halfway to his lips. He was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Not charm or confidence, but pure panic. The results came back this week, I said, pulling the folded report from my jacket pocket. And they confirmed what I'd started to suspect. The baby my wife is carrying isn't mine. Gasps echoed through the room. Someone's glass shattered against the floor. My mother stood up so quickly her chair fell over backward. According to the genetic analysis, I continued, my voice carrying over the chaos, the baby belongs to my brother Dean. Apparently they've been having an affair for months, lying to everyone, making a fool out of me and destroying our family. The room erupted. People were standing, talking, shouting questions. Brianna looked horrified from the head table, her perfect wedding dissolving into chaos. Dean was on his feet now, his face flushed with anger or embarrassment or both. You're crazy, he shouted across the room. This is insane. I would never. Never what? I shot back. Never sleep with your brother's wife? Never betray your own family? The DNA doesn't lie, Dean, unlike you. Olivia was crying now, mascara streaming down her cheeks. Nick, please, you don't understand. I understand perfectly. You've been cheating on me with my brother, and now you're pregnant with his child. What exactly am I missing? The confrontation might have escalated further, but Max appeared at my side, tugging on my jacket with a confused expression. Dad, what's happening? He asked, his voice small and scared in the midst of all the chaos. The question stopped me cold. In my anger and hurt and desire for revenge, I'd forgotten about the most important person in the room, my son, who was watching his family implode in front of a room full of relatives and strangers. I knelt down to his level, putting my hands on his shoulders. I'm sorry, buddy. This isn't how I wanted you to find out. Find out what? That things are going to be different for a while. But no matter what happens, you're still my son, and I love you more than anything in the world. He nodded solemnly, not fully understanding, but trusting me anyway. It was that trust that finally broke through my anger, reminding me that whatever satisfaction I'd gotten from exposing Dean and Olivia's affair, there would be consequences that went far beyond their embarrassment. I stood up, looking around the room at the faces staring back at me, some shocked, some sympathetic, some disapproving. Brianna was crying at the head table, her perfect wedding ruined by my revelation. Dean had disappeared, probably slipping out the back door to avoid further confrontation. Olivia sat slumped in her chair, her hands covering her face. I'm sorry for disrupting your wedding, Brianna, I said, my voice quieter now. You deserved better than this. You all did. I picked up Max and walked out of the ballroom, leaving behind the wreckage of my marriage and my family's reputation. Behind me, the chaos continued. Voices raised in argument and speculation, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor as people moved to comfort the bride or demand explanations from anyone who might have them. But I was done explaining. The truth was out now, for better or worse. Whatever came next, at least everyone would know exactly who Dean and Olivia really were. And sometimes that was justice enough. The hotel room felt like a refuge after the chaos of the reception, though I knew it was only temporary. Max had fallen asleep on one of the double beds, exhausted by the emotional upheaval of the evening, while I sat in the chair by the window, staring out at the parking lot and trying to process what I'd just done. My phone had been buzzing constantly since we'd left the ballroom. Calls from family members, text messages ranging from supportive to furious, voicemails I wasn't ready to listen to yet. I'd turned off the sound and tried to focus on what came next. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. I looked through the peephole and saw my mother standing in the hallway, still wearing her wedding dress and looking older than I'd ever seen her. "Mom," I said, opening the door. "I wasn't expecting— May I come in?" I stepped aside to let her enter, glancing at Max to make sure he was still sleeping. She followed my gaze and lowered her voice. "How is he?" "Confused, scared. He doesn't really understand what happened, but he knows it was bad." She nodded, settling into the other chair with a weary sigh. "That was quite a speech you gave." "I'm sorry about ruining Brianna's wedding. That wasn't my intention." "Wasn't it?" Her tone was gentle but pointed. "You could have handled this privately, Nick. You could have confronted them at home, filed for divorce quietly, kept the family drama out of the public eye." "They didn't keep their affair out of the public eye. Everyone saw them sneaking off together, saw the way they looked at each other. I just gave their behavior a name. And destroyed your sister's wedding in the process." The guilt hit me like a physical blow. I'd been so focused on my own pain, my own need for justice, that I'd barely considered how my revelation would affect Brianna. She'd spent months planning her perfect day, and I'd turned it into a spectacle that would be remembered for all the wrong reasons. "Is she okay?" "She's upset, obviously, but she's more worried about you than angry about the wedding. She knows how much Dean and Olivia's betrayal must have hurt you." "It did hurt. It still does." "I know, sweetheart, but what you did tonight, that hurt too. A lot of people." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of the evening settling between us. I'd gotten my revenge, exposed the truth about Dean and Olivia's affair, but the victory felt hollow now that I could see the collateral damage. "What happens now?" I asked. "That's up to you. Olivia left right after you did. I think she went home. Dean disappeared entirely. The rest of the family is trying to figure out how to process what they learned tonight." "Do you believe me? About the affair, the DNA test?" She gave me a look that reminded me I was still her child, no matter how old I got. "Nicholas, I've suspected something was going on between them for months. The way they acted around each other, the disappearing acts, the guilty looks. I hoped I was wrong, but deep down I knew better." "Why didn't you say anything?" "Because it wasn't my place, and because I hoped you'd figure it out on your own and handle it better than this." The criticism stung, but I couldn't argue with it. I had handled it badly. Let my anger and hurt override my judgment, but I wasn't sure I regretted it entirely. "They made a fool out of me, Mom, in front of the whole family for months. Everyone probably knew what was going on except me." "Some people suspected, yes, but most of us hoped we were wrong. Family betrayal isn't something anyone wants to believe." A soft sound from the bed made us both look over. Max was stirring, his eyes fluttering open in the dim light from the window. "Dad?" he said sleepily. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine, buddy. Grandma came to check on us." He sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Can we go home now? I don't like this place." The request was simple enough, but it raised complicated questions. Home was the house I shared with Olivia, the place where we'd built our life together. Could I go back there now, knowing what I knew? Could I pretend things were normal for Max's sake? "We'll figure that out tomorrow," I said. "Tonight we're staying here." My mother stood up, smoothing her dress. "I should get back to the hotel. Your father is worried, and I need to check on Brianna. Tell her I'm sorry, really sorry." "Tell her yourself when you're ready. She'll understand, Nick. We all will, eventually." After she left, I helped Max get ready for bed properly, letting him brush his teeth and change into the pajamas I'd packed in our overnight bag. He seemed calmer now, though I could tell he was still processing everything that had happened. "Dad, are you and Mom getting divorced?" he asked as I tucked him into bed. The question was so direct, so matter-of-fact, that it took me by surprise. "Why would you ask that?" "Because Tommy Henderson's parents got divorced after his dad found out his mom was cheating, and tonight you said Mom was cheating with Uncle Dean." I sat on the edge of the bed, trying to find words that were honest but age-appropriate. "Mom and I have some problems we need to work out. I don't know what's going to happen yet." "Will I still get to see you if you get divorced?" "Every day, if I can manage it. You're my son, Max. Nothing will ever change that." "What about the baby?" The question I'd been dreading. How do you explain to an 8-year-old that his sibling might actually be his cousin? That the family he'd known his entire life was built on lies? "The baby will be your brother or sister no matter what happens between me and Mom. Babies need love and protection, and that's what families do." It wasn't the whole truth, but it was true enough for now. The rest could wait until he was older, until I figured out how to navigate this mess myself. He seemed satisfied with that answer, settling back into the pillows with a yawn. "I love you, Dad." I love you too, buddy, more than you'll ever know. I stayed with him until he fell asleep again, then returned to my chair by the window. The parking lot was quieter now, most of the wedding guests having returned to their rooms or driven home to process the evening's revelations. My phone buzzed with another text message. This one was from Olivia. "We need to talk. Please come home." I stared at the message for a long time, trying to decide how to respond. Part of me wanted to ignore her, to let her stew in the consequences of her choices. But another part, the part that had loved her for 15 years, that had built a life with her, wanted to hear what she had to say. "Not tonight," I typed back. "Maybe tomorrow." "Nick, please. I can explain everything." "Can you explain why you slept with my brother? Can you explain why you lied to me about the baby? Because those are the only explanations I'm interested in." She didn't respond to that, and I put the phone away. Tomorrow would bring enough complications, lawyers to call, living arrangements to figure out, family relationships to navigate. Tonight, I just wanted to sit with my son and try to make sense of how my life had fallen apart so completely. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd spent weeks gathering evidence, planning my revelation, imagining the satisfaction I'd feel when Dean and Olivia were finally exposed. But now that it was done, all I felt was empty. The truth was out, justice had been served, but it hadn't fixed anything. If anything, it had made everything worse. My marriage was over. My relationship with my brother was destroyed. My sister's wedding was ruined. My son was confused and scared. The baby Olivia was carrying would grow up knowing that his or her conception had torn apart two families. I'd won the battle but lost the war, and I wasn't sure the victory had been worth the cost. Outside, a car pulled into the parking lot, its headlights sweeping across my window. I watched as Dean got out, looking disheveled and defeated. He stood by his BMW for a moment, staring up at the hotel, then got back in and drove away. Good, I thought. Let him run. Let him face the consequences of his choices alone, the way I'd been facing mine for weeks. My phone buzzed one more time. This message was from Gus. "Heard about what happened. You okay?" "Been better," I typed back. "But I'm surviving." "You did what you had to do. Don't let anyone tell you different." Maybe he was right. Maybe exposing Dean and Olivia's affair at the wedding had been the only way to ensure that the truth came out, that they faced real consequences for their betrayal. Maybe public humiliation was exactly what they deserved. Or maybe I just made a bad situation worse, hurting innocent people in my quest for revenge. Either way, it was done now. The secret was out, the family was fractured, and there was no going back. All I could do was figure out how to move forward, how to protect Max from the worst of the fallout, and how to build a new life from the wreckage of the old one. It wasn't going to be easy, but then again, nothing worthwhile ever was.